late Pope Francis, who passed away earlier today at the age of 88. The pontiff is widely being remembered for leaving a legacy of humility, compassion and reform. Braamfontein Holy Trinity's Father Russell Pollitt joins us to reflect on the Pope's life. A very good evening to you, Father. Thank you so much for joining us. And condolences to you and the Catholic Church, of course. What was your initial reaction to the breaking news this morning about the Pope's passing?
Good evening, Masa, and to all your viewers. I was shocked. I knew the Pope was unwell and maybe he was living on borrowed time, but given the fact that over the last couple of days, and especially yesterday, he'd made more and more public appearances. He went onto the square. He met the American vice president. I thought, okay, maybe things are looking up. So when I saw a message which I got from a journalist in Rome this morning, I was quite shocked that he had passed away, but not entirely surprised given his health in the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Father Russell, he was quite busy over the holy period of the Easter weekend. I mean, beginning on Thursday, holding prayers in prisons with prisoners. He also, of course, met with the U.S. Vice President, J.D. Vance, on Easter Sunday. And, he also took some time out to greet the tens of thousands of people who made their way to the square, considering there were concerns that he'd resign at some point because he was pretty unwell. How telling is it that he served till the very end?
I think that speaks of the man that he was. He wasn't going to stay in bed and be confined, if he could help it. He was going to be out and amongst people, because I think one of the qualities of Pope Francis was he was someone who loved people. He wanted to be with people. I mean, I think he was also a workaholic, and I think he was quite stubborn, because we know too that his medical team said that he should rest for 2 months or 3 months. And he did for a couple of days. We didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden, he started to make these public appearances again. But it speaks of, I think, the kind of man that he was, that he wanted to be where people were. And I think many people go to Rome at Easter time. They have great expectation of seeing the Pope. It's the most important celebration in the Christian calendar. And the Pope, of course, always gives what we call an urbi et orbi, a blessing to the church and to the entire world. People want to be there for that. And so I suspect that Francis knew that, and he wanted to make sure as well that he met the expectations of people and gave that blessing.
And, as you mentioned, Father Russell, that he was a bit of a workaholic as well. The tributes that have been pouring in, just also speaking to that, about how passionate he was, particularly about people, as you also mentioned. Also considering that while he was in hospital, the job didn't actually stop for him. There were instances while he was there where he would still be sending statements about various atrocities around the world. We do know that matters of the Middle East and what is currently going on in Congo greatly affected him as well. With his loss, when we're thinking about these atrocities that he was quite vocal about as well, what kind of a void does that leave in terms of leadership and a moral compass for the world?
Masa, that's a very good question, because I think that he was recognized as a voice of reason, as a moral compass, as you say, for so many people in the world. And it has often struck me how many people who are not even Catholic or even Christian have said to me that the one moral voice in the world in terms of leadership at the moment in a very fractured and divided world has been the Pope himself. The Pope, as we know, has spoken out fearlessly. Even in January, just before he was sick, sent a letter to the bishops of the United States warning about some of the administration there's moves to deport migrants, saying that to the bishops, please, I urge you to urge your government to ensure the dignity of migrants and refugees as human beings is respected. He has, as you rightly pointed out, become more and more vocal about the situation in the Middle East, calling into question what is happening in Gaza on more than one occasion. So I think there is going to be a void, because at the moment I think that political leaders are also so divided on these issues that it is very difficult for them perhaps to make a stand. The Pope could make a stand, and the Pope, because of his stature and because I think as well of the person that he was able to say, this is not good, or we should not accept this. I think the issue of migrants, is going to be a one where there's going to be a huge voyage, because we know that many politicians are using the question of migration in their politicking. And the Pope was very, very clear on what he thought about that issue.
Yeah, and he was quite vocal about it as of like instantly and immediately as he got elected as Pope as well. He was known for calling a spade, and obviously more speaking for the downtrodden, like migrants as well. A lot has been said about his legacy when it comes to migrants, when it comes to poor people, marginalized people, and of course the LGBTI community as well. When you think about his legacy, Father Russell, what comes top of mind?
I think there's two words that I would use. The first one is what was in his motto right from the beginning, the word mercy, that Francis was a man who really believed in mercy. One of his first actions was to call a Jubilee year of mercy in the church when he became Pope. If we think of those first images of him, when he went to Lampedusa, which is in the Mediterranean, where migrants drowned, and he threw a reef overboard, and he prayed for migrants from that boat. Francis had a deep mercy, compassion for people. And I think this goes back to even before he was Pope. We heard stories when he was Archbishop in Buenos Aires of him getting on public transport and going to those poverty-stricken neighborhoods, slums, and just being with people. The complications that people often find themselves in because human life is complicated. You mentioned the LGBTQ community. He was a man who really wanted others to experience through him and through the church the mercy of God. And I think very closely linked to that, the other word that I would use is inclusion. We live in a very divided world, as I've said, where it's so much easier to exclude people, to have us and them, and us versus them. And I think Pope Francis really tried to preach against that. And his actions showed that, not just when it came to migrants or the LGBT community. The way he dealt with other Christian churches. There has sometimes been division and exclusion between churches. Or if you think of his many visits into the Muslim world, he went to Egypt, he went to Morocco, where he tried to reach out and to say, let's look at what's common here, our humanity. And because of our humanity, we need to include each other, dialogue with each other, talk to each other. That exclusion is going to lead us all down a very dark path, whereas inclusion opens the door to possibilities. So mercy and inclusion for me would be two very important words to remember Pope Francis by.
Mercy and inclusion indeed. And speaking about inclusion as well, it was Pope Francis who enlarged the role of women in the Vatican and made it clear that women were equal partners in the operations of the church as well. If you could talk to us a little bit about his inclusion of women within the church.
Yes, another very important move that he made was he gave women positions in the church that they did not have before, And I think making this move to try and to ensure that, he was slowly including the other half of humanity, which for many women is a very painful thing, that they feel excluded from the church. He had these recent meetings of the Universal Church where the question of the role and the ministry of women in the church was included. I know for some women he didn't go far enough, because many women were talking about, the possibility of a woman's diaconate in the church. The Pope didn't go that far, but I think he did open the door to try and include women where he could. He's opened the door for further steps, which had never happened before. So some women would feel what he did for the cause of women was wonderful, and other women, I think, will still feel that maybe he didn't go far enough. and yet he did see that this is something that needs to be addressed.
Father Russell, you mentioned it being a Jubilee year this year as well. Is there any symbolism or significance to the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope, passing in a Jubilee year?
I think there is, and I think especially this Jubilee year, because Pope Francis called this a Jubilee of hope, and he encouraged the whole church to go out throughout the world to be messengers of hope. The Pope was really concerned that many people live in a situation where they feel that they are hopeless. And I think the other very important link to this Jubilee year is, for us Christians, Easter, or Easter Sunday, is the Easter season is the moment of hope, because we believe that Jesus Christ died and rose from the dead, and this instills a great hope for us that we too one day will rise and be with God. And so it is in some ways very significant that in this Jubilee of hope, in the very days when we celebrate this great hope, Pope Francis passes on and goes to the Lord. So it is very symbolic, I think, and I thought about that earlier today, and I thought to myself, how symbolic is this, that he has died in the hope year that he himself called for.
Yeah, and just lastly, Father, as well, just looking at the kind of man that Pope Francis was. He was quite a unique man as well. Lots of great things being spoken of him. When you're looking at the person who would be replacing him, what kind of traits do you think they should be taking from Pope Francis?
Masa, that's a very big question. I think that if the next, each pope is unique. I think, Pope Benedict, who was before Pope Francis, was unique. He had a set of gifts. He was probably one of the best theologians the church has had in the last 100 years. Pope Francis was a pastor. He was a shepherd. He was worried about, as I've said, he was really concerned about people. I think the next pope, if he can maintain the humanity that Pope Francis brought to the papacy, I think that would be important. I think he will come with his own gifts, with his own talents. Pope Francis chose certain things to put on his agenda: migrants and refugees. One example, the poor, the sick, the elderly, marginalized people were for Pope Francis really, I think, at the center of what he addressed as Pope. The next Pope may want to address slightly different issues. We don't know. I don't think anybody expected Pope Francis to address some of the issues that he chose to address. So in some way, it's very difficult to tell. But I think if the next Pope could be someone who has this humanity that Pope Francis has displayed, has showed us a kind of human side of the papacy. And I think if he could be merciful and compassionate, I think he would be continuing the legacy of Pope Francis. That's not to say people like Pope Benedict and Pope John Paul II were not merciful and compassionate, but I think Pope Francis just did it in a very different way, in a way that ordinary people could relate to. And if the next Pope can do that, this legacy, I think, will continue.
Well, Father Russell, thank you so much for just sharing these tributes with us this evening. Really appreciate your time. That's Father Russell Pollitt from the Braamfontein Holy Trinity.